Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, so excited to be welcoming back Matt Seltzer to the podcast today. Matt is a published author and the SVP of Marketing and Research at Intuify, which has developed some leading technology platforms that support a deeper level of marketing research for some of the largest and most widely recognized consumer brands of today. So excited to have you back on the podcast, Matt, talking about all things marketing research. You recently also brought your brand together with Intuify. So excited to get into this conversation with you.
Oh, Dave, thanks for having me back. How cool is that to say?
Yeah, right?
And we've done a lot since we last chatted.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get into it with you. I mean, I think to kind of kick things off, I'd love to just get the story behind your original business, which was S2. Yep. That was how you had come on the podcast before. But talk me through kind of, what prompted this merger with Intuify. I'd love to just get that high level kind of version and then, dive into it.
Let's do it. So my background, and this will catch us up to it, is in the ad agency world. That's how I started in my whole career. And I fell into the market research department at an ad agency. And this is going back a ways. And I said, I love this. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. This is cool. I like that we do surveys, focus groups, talk to customers. And what we learn helps influence ad design, media strategy, communications plan, all of it. So I did that for a long time, and then I ended up getting laid off in 2008, which a lot of people got laid off in 2008. But I found out most ad agencies that I looked at after did not have a research department. And that's the thing I wanted to keep doing. And there's a lot of reasons why that is. It has to do with the size of an agency to support a full-time research department. And so I've gotten to do some very cool things. Since then, I've done strategy, I've done copywriting, a lot of account management. I really love that whole world. But research is still my baby. It's the thing that I love. So 2019, I decided to start my own firm, S2, to do research for all those marketing teams that I just knew didn't have that access in-house. Been a really cool ride. Grew my team to 4 people, and we've done work with some brands that I'm incredibly proud of. And so at the end of last year, so the end of 2022, I started talking to a great guy named Kevin Carty, and he'd started this company called Intuify. And as it turns out, he started it September of 2019, the same month I did. So our companies are doing a very similar age. He worked with some very cool brands that I was really impressed with. But the thing that fascinated me about Intuify is that they built the best survey experience I've ever seen on the planet. And surveys, are a big part of what I do. I know I mentioned focus groups and interviews, but really surveys make up more than half of the research work that we do. And it's because surveys are fascinating. With a caveat to that, if you go back and look at a paper survey from 1985, the kind that someone would stop you in the mall and ask if you could take a survey. If you look at that survey and you look at a survey today, meaning any survey platform that's out there, I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of them, they're going to look like that paper survey just now on your computer.
Right.
Well, Intuify built, when I say the best platform I've ever seen, what I mean is they built gamified versions of questions and interactive versions and mobile first thinking, which if you think about what's worked and hasn't worked on mobile devices, you start to understand, we get dopamine drips from swiping left or right, or we get engagement pieces from, so it goes and goes. And this prompted me to say, I really like what you're doing at Intuify. Let's join forces. And so we did, the Dragon Ball Z fusion dance, and it ended. And now my team and we all work under Intuify, and I was promoted to senior vice president of market research, which is a really cool title. But the big thing is that we're working with the same brands that we were, as well as some very new, fascinating brands, and all of it we're bringing something that I can confidently say is the best survey experience on the planet. I can talk about why that matters in a little while if we want to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, it's, it's such a cool journey. And, I remember kind of when we first connected and hearing through all of that story. And so it's, it's a fun journey and a fun story to listen to. I think one of the things that's always interesting from a kind of a merger and bringing, different cultures, different businesses together, is the people component, right? I mean, you've got, we talked a little bit about the technology and kind of, the technology that Intuify is using to leverage from a customer facing standpoint, but, looking kind of internally to both the culture piece, and how that kind of rolled out, as well as, like some of the kind of processes and systems that you all are using. I mean, what's your perspective on companies that are maybe looking to do something like this? I think that, going into maybe the next few years, we'll hear a lot more stories of, acquisitions and mergers and, those types of things. So, from your perspective, how did that work, kind of meshing the two companies together from that culture piece and, the kind of internal processes and systems? How did that work?
No, it's I am stoked that you asked about that, because it's a topic I just like to talk about in general. So culture, you said it over and over, and it's the word to be thinking about to use. When I met Kevin, our CEO, we were literally introduced on LinkedIn, and we started a LinkedIn conversation. And I've actually never had this happen on LinkedIn before, but we were texting. I mean, we weren't sending an email and then you wait 3 days and then he sends an email. We got to the point where we're literally having a conversation, and LinkedIn said, "Hey, do you want to have a video conversation?" I didn't even know that was an option. And so we jumped on a video and we ended up talking for another hour. And I say this because we've met people like that. We, as in you, me, everyone on this call. And you don't always meet people like that. And it's not the person, it's you and the person. There's something clicking there. Follow that. Like, that's step one, I would say, is if you feel like, hey, this is a good conversation, let's explore it. Follow that thinking. We merged pretty fast, and we started the beginning of this year officially under Intuify's banner. I don't know if I would have felt comfortable doing that if I didn't feel comfortable with every conversation I'd had thus far. And I did. Separately, I'm a big culture guy, I think. My team's here. They can tell me if I'm not. But I've been fortunate to surround myself with some great people at S2. So they think and feel like me. So when I'm saying, like, okay, I think Intuify might be a great fit for me or for us, I'm definitely thinking us. I'm not just thinking about me. I'm trying to think about how does the whole S2 puzzle piece fit into Intuify. That's where my head was. But I'll tell you the other piece that I thought was fascinating. My team for the last few months has not been as busy as they could. And what's interesting about that is it has nothing to do with work, in the sense that we've got work figured out. Expenses are good. Employee payroll, we're good. It's that what took team members that I had two people 2 days to handle something a few years ago, one person can handle that in half a day. And so all of a sudden you get to this point where you go, okay, well, you want people to stay engaged. You want them to keep learning. You want them to do more. And I didn't necessarily have more work for everyone. I mean, everyone was busy, but they could have been a lot busier, and they wanted to be. And again, that goes back to, I've surrounded myself with some people that are very similar to me. I have the same kind of thinking. Yeah. Well, here's Intuify, who had some great work, and my team was ready to go to dive right into it. And now it's not like a vendor relationship where you say, like, okay, hand us your work. It's our work collectively. Plates are filled. People are excited, and my favorite part is when there's a lot of work happening. You know, we've got a small office literally out of my living room. This is for Intuify is based all over the country and parts of the globe. S2 was based in Las Vegas, and team members would literally work out of my living room. We've kept that going to keep the culture going. But when everyone's working on a bunch of different ideas, there's an energy there. And I know it's a weird word to use, but it's the right word. That's the kind of energy you want to bring into every workday, every business. And so to your original question, measuring, are we going to get energy from this project as opposed to expending energy? We realize, no, this is good for our souls. Again, I'm using weird words, but it's kind of the right way I like to think about it. That this was a good fit. But you got to be thinking about all those things. You can't just think, okay, you do the same work as me, I do the same work as you, let's get married. It doesn't work like that without some of those other pieces, because you got to work together every day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think, and I like the way you framed a lot of that because, as kind of the counterpoint, I do think a lot of these types of transactions end up being, less about finding those right fits and more about, does this make sense for maybe me or a smaller group of people versus, how you all have been looking at it. And, ultimately, I think those are the things that lead you to this success. One of the things that I think we have been hearing about lately, and it's kind of a bit of what prompted the question, but, you hear a lot of layoffs in and around tech these days. And, when I think about that and I look at that, those are also organizations that typically, kind of have exponential growth and then they'll pull back, right? And then they'll hire 10,000 people and then they'll, let go of, 2,500 of them, right?
It's feast and famine.
Yeah. And kind of what you brought up in terms of, the workload that was available and kind of the systemization and process piece around that. When I'm talking about and thinking about how do you help organizations kind of, drive growth and operate with excellence, it is all around those pieces. It's kind of taking all of those steps together, right? So you're not bringing on, 15 new people, let's say in a size company like yours today, together with Intuify, and then saying, oh, you know what? We really don't need 15. We probably really only needed 10, and so now all of a sudden, it impacts the culture. It impacts everybody, throughout that organization. And I think that oftentimes, from a leadership and ownership perspective, people aren't thinking about that. So I really love, how you kind of approached and articulated what happened in your merger, because I think it's lessons learned for any size company that is contemplating something like that, or even contemplating, their own kind of internal growth over the next few years.
I mean, it's a scary challenge because officially I've been growing S2 for 4 years. Now I'm not. That's kind of hard to think about, but separately, okay, what do you want to do every day when you wake up? And I know the answer to that. I want to do cool market research. Nothing about a few months ago and today has changed in that regard. And I've kind of kept my focus on that because I actually get to do cooler research now. I'll tell you one other piece to the culture thing, and this got evaluated after we'd already made the decision, but it's been a nice bonus. So I read The E-Myth a few years ago, and I'm sure everyone's read that one.
Great book.
Oh, yeah. And it gave me a lot to think about. And one of the things that stuck with me, he said the perfect startup has 5 people. And I'm going to butcher the job titles. I'm not even going to worry about the job titles right now. But I've thought about that for a long time because it's really just been me. And I've got a great team, but they shouldn't have that responsibility of the things that come with a business owner. And so you want to just constantly be, okay, well, what really blew me away about the 5 people was the ability to brainstorm openly with multiple people who have the same common goal. So I mentioned our CEO. When we started this, we said, I don't know how this is going to work, so let's figure it out. And we have a daily call every single morning. And it's actually how I start my day. I have my Monster Energy drink, which I'm finishing up here. And I talk market research. I literally get to talk for 30 minutes to an hour with a brilliant person about how do you grow a market research firm. And you got to realize 6 months ago, 4 years ago, when I started the company, I would have given my left foot for the opportunity to talk every morning with a brilliant person about how to grow a market research firm. That's exactly how I get to start my day now. And it's neat to have someone that I can throw the ball to and who wants to throw it back. That's another piece about culture that if anyone who's thinking about just joining forces, what do you get in return, and what do you get to give? Because that's actually a very cool proposition to have someone to talk about this stuff with.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would equate it, one of the kind of newer projects that we've been doing from a company standpoint is starting to build out a community for people. And, it's around the same thought process, right? Because what I've found that, even in large organizations, there are a lot of folks, specifically in leadership roles, that kind of feel like they're on that island, so to speak. They're responsible for a team, or they're maybe responsible for an even larger team, or maybe a division even. And yet, when you kind of look out at the landscape, there's not many people at their same level necessarily that they can have those kind of, collective calls with. And, and as I kind of jokingly say, sometimes you're commiserating, other times you're ideating, right? But to have somebody or multiple people in that, I was very fortunate that I was surrounded by many, many people as kind of throughout my professional career. And so, yeah, I completely agree with that. There is so much value in building those relationships. And it's really cool that, you've done it in this way. So go ahead.
Why, just to your point in networks, I do market research, and I say that because that's actually a small field. There aren't many of us. There's thousands, not hundreds of thousands across the whole U.S. And there's a great guy named James in Brazil. He has a podcast called the Happy Market Research Podcast, and he started a research group for professional researchers. He started during COVID. That's how Kevin and I got connected, and actually it was through a mutual friend that we both knew in that group. Networks are important. I agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Let's shift the focus, back to kind of the market research component. And,
sure.
I think we kind of kicked off a couple of things. I think from a general perspective, it would be fun to chat about, really the importance and why this is something that kind of gets missed so often, because, as we talked before, it really does influence all of these things. Like, I'll give you for instance, I literally just got off of a phone call an hour ago with somebody that was in the direct-to-consumer space that basically told me, that they went in a particular direction with a product launch of theirs without understanding the consumer aspect. They kind of put their stamp on what they thought was going to sell the best, and they packaged it up and they launched it. And while they've sold some, they've kind of now recognized through that customer interaction piece, hey, maybe we missed the mark a little bit. Where I look at the stuff that you all are doing, and say, well, this would have been a perfect partnership, because you would have, been able to identify these types of things, going in, right? It gets back to that reactive versus proactive conversation. So,
well, and I hear that story, and I'm a huge proponent of putting all your love and passion into something and going to market with it, with the note that that's still guessing. And all of it's guessing. But what if instead of guessing? And so by guessing, I mean, like, we're gonna sell our product this way. There's a lot of different ways to sell a product. We all know this, but or a service. You could say we're the cheapest or the fastest or the cheapest and the fastest, but we're not talking about quality. Or maybe we have the highest quality. There's a lot of different ways to talk about the same thing. So which one do you use? And that's where I go with guessing, because that's all we do. But what if, instead of guessing, we asked 500 of your real customers, which is the best plan? And they told us. That's research. It's taking the guessing out. It's the difference between throwing spaghetti at the wall and using that laser-guided spaghetti shooter. I probably should come up with a better analogy. But
I would like to see that, though.
Well, you get where I mean, though. It takes the guesswork out. And the guesswork, it takes the guesswork out. Let me rephrase. There's two ways to think about that. The first is taking the guesswork out before you go to market, meaning before you even ask the question, should we compete on price or quality or price and quality, et cetera. You go and find the answer to that. That's step one. And then from there, you'd come up with your strategy, then you'd implement your strategy. But not guessing part two is at the tail end of that where you go, did it work? And we have different ways of measuring, did it work? We put X number of dollars into the market in advertising. Did we get a number that was higher than X back in revenue? In that case, we might evaluate, did it work? And we'd say, yeah, it worked. X was, this was more positive. This was positive. But what if I could tell you, okay, you split your ad dollars 50% between digital marketing and 50% between outdoor. So billboards. And that's a weird mix, but I'm just coming up with an example. And
Sure.
What if I told you that your digital accounted for 85% of your revenue? You put 50% of your ad budget in, it accounted for 85% of your revenue. Well, most people would take the hint then and double down into digital. Don't even worry about the outdoor. The outdoor was getting you 15% of revenue. Double into digital. But without doing the research again on the back end, you just know, okay, we put X number of dollars into the market. We made a revenue figure that was positive. Our marketing works. Those are two different schools of thought, and one of those produces better revenue the following year.
Yeah.
And all that's research.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it back to your point, right? It's the educated guess versus, literally just taking a stab at something and saying, well, we missed, let's throw some more money at it and see if we hit it around the second time, So yeah, it's, it's interesting because I think the other part that, maybe is there's some misconception around. I know that you were kind of trying to address some of this with S2, but, talk a little bit about the size businesses that are leveraging these things and where does it make sense, and talk about it from, whatever perspective you think makes the most sense. Because I know some people like to say revenue, some people like to say, kind of verticals and those types of things. So,
well, I'll give you three stories that all kind of tie together. The first is that who's using research now? I mean, I can walk into this business's doors and say they're using research, even if I've never been there. It's the biggest businesses on the planet, meaning, and that's not something they got because they're big. They're big because they did it. I'm talking Google, Pepsi, you name it, they're doing it.
That's a crazy distinction, though, because I think a lot of people think that it's the opposite. I think a lot of people think I can only afford to do this once we've gotten there. It's kind of like the idea generally around bigger marketing budgets, right? Where, well, I can't do this because we're not Coke, we're not Pepsi, we're not fill in the blank, where, what you just said, I mean, it makes a ton of sense because it's what's driving the growth,
Well, every business book, and I read a lot of business books, but every business book out there would say, if you don't think you're Pepsi, you'll never be Pepsi. So to that point, it's act as if kind of thinking.
Yeah.
The second story I'll tell you of who's using research is little companies that think they should be doing research. And I say this because a lot of clients we work with are small. I even want to say medium, but no, we've worked with some small businesses. And what I can tell you consistently is those small businesses cease to be small after they do this stuff. So again, it's that growth mentality. This is part of it. The third story, and this is the interesting one. So there were two businesses that asked us to bid on work, and they were competitors. They're both in the exact same industry, right? And they had very similar asks, so the costs were very similar. One of these businesses had never done research before. They'd never done it. The other business had done this exact study. They did it 5 years ago. They just wanted to re-up the numbers. They wanted to work with a different vendor, so a different partner for this. So meaning they had experience with research. Two identical projects. The business that had done research before, they said yes instantly. The other one ended up passing. Because they had already, not why they passed, but the business that went forward, the research is already in their mindset. Just like the Google, just like the growth company. It's when research is in your mindset, you see it as essential, not luxury.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it's for, I would say, and you'll have the data to back this up, but I would say I would equate it to people that are, maybe uncomfortable being on social media. And the businesses that look at that, those platforms, regardless of the platform we're talking about, but look at that as, I don't need to be there, or if I'm there, it's in a very, kind of transactional way, right? They're not thinking about it as a tool to leverage, in order to grow. And, it sounds very similar to me where you've got those two pools of people. So, if you're going to be in the pool of, I want to build a big brand and I want to be, the next Coca-Cola or whatever, these are things that you're more apt to look at and ultimately leverage. Look, there's two ways you can learn anything, right? You can learn through trial and error and getting your own bruises, or, you can look to others who have already received their lumps and, are willing to pass that information on to you, to avoid you taking those same lumps, right?
Well, and I tell people all the time, I have no clue how to run a business or start a business. I have for years, but I say this because, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I know how to follow successful people and do what they did. And arguably, you go to any of the world's best athletes or authors or any the pinnacles of any field would, and I've tested this, would tell you the same thing. That it's not about what they think they know. It's, okay, I saw someone else do it very successfully. I'm going to follow in their steps, and I'm going to take the pieces that feel right to me, and I'm going to create my own homebrew. And apparently that's actually how it's supposed to be done. But we assume it's supposed to be original and created to us. And no, right. I know how to follow success. And hopefully it works out for me too. Well, it's the same thing with the business. So not just the person, but if you want to be the next Pepsi or YouTube, do what Pepsi and YouTube are doing. Again, you can put your own spin on it, but to reject the thinking is arrogant. Sorry, listeners. I hope that's not too strong.
No, it's appropriate. It's by far appropriate. And, but it's interesting because every business has, similar challenges from the standpoint of, you could look at a market research business and say, well, you have all these available customers out there. Everybody should be doing this, right? But at the end of the day, the challenge still is to get, these brands, these challenger brands, these up and comers, the people that are not necessarily, focused on this to be a focus. And then the people that are accepting, of it already is to get in front of them as well. So, you can take those types of challenges and apply them to any business that is, kind of in the growth phase and trying to connect with more customers. So talk maybe. Oh, go ahead. You have a comment there?
No. Keep going. I want to hear the question now.
No, I would love to find out a little bit more on the technology piece. Kind of what those platforms are like, how the user experience kind of goes into, making this a successful campaign and delivering the insights ultimately that can drive better decisions for these businesses.
Absolutely. So I'll give you two answers to that. The first is what I've always been doing, and I'm very proud of. This was really the catalyst behind S2 when I started the original company. We wanted to deliver things that people would use. Let me give you a better example. You think about market research. What are you going to get after you commission your research? Well, you're going to get the big 200-page boring research report. Everyone knows that. Everyone expects that of market research firms. It's part of our DNA. And I'll tell you, we still deliver 200-page research reports, but that's because it's expected. What I'm more excited that we deliver is things that people need. I'll give you, there's a lot of different examples. Let's say we're working with writers or art directors or a visual marketing department or maybe even social media. Those teams don't want to read a 200-page research report. They want to read a creative brief. And for those who don't know, a creative brief is a 2-page document on the high side. Maybe it's 1 page that says, this is who we're talking to. This is what matters. This is where they are. And really, that's about it. And you think at that minimalist level, that's all a writer, a creator should need. But then it comes down, well, you need some really good inputs. We write creative briefs because we want creative teams to be using our insights. And rather than me pushing a 200-page report down someone's throat, I'd rather give them the thing that they're already used to. But it's not me filling out that creative brief. It's the 500 real customers we talked to through survey, or the 30 that we talked to through focus group. It's their voice channeled into this. Same thing we do messaging briefs, media briefs, and those would be for different teams, PR teams, media buyers, etc. Sometimes we'll produce an actual strategy for clients, especially if they're not a dedicated marketing team that we're working with. They don't want insights. They want to be told on day 1, do this type of marketing, day 2, do this type of marketing. And we have the background experience, and now with Intuify, we have even more of that, to translate the insights into actionable things to do. It's about, again, how far do you want us to take the ball? But
yeah,
I don't want to give you something you don't use because, okay, it sounds redundant, you won't use it.
Yeah.
And that hurts research, that hurts everyone. It wastes money. But my favorite thing lately to be delivering to clients is interactive dashboards. So let's say we do a survey and you think, here's charts and graphs, and this says what the whole survey said. But I don't care about what the whole survey said. What if we identify somewhere in there that women ages 28 to 35 in these 5 zip codes, they account for 60% of your sales. So that's all you need to worry about, that audience, right? Well, creating a dashboard lets me give a client the ability to click on women 28 to 35 in these zip code, whatever the examples I said. And it updates survey results to be just about that audience. And in fact, what will give you back, you being, media buyer, strategist, any type of marketing person, will give you that specific audience's psychographic readouts. So how do they think? How do they feel? What matters to them? What are their media consumption habits? So where are they on their PC, or are they on their phone? If they're on their PC, is it their work PC, their home PC? Does that matter? So again, everything that a media buyer would need, as well as a journey map within all of that. So how does this type of thinking, feeling, media using person discover things? And keep in mind, discovery is different than engagement.
Yeah.
How do they engage? And so we map all that out. But I say this because all of this comes from these interactive dashboards that we're programming. And that's neat because all of a sudden we can give a client data in hand in a way that they can engage with it and use it. And the best way to learn anything is to use it or dive in yourself. So now we've created experiences where real marketing teams can just spend all day learning about their audience, which any marketing person would tell you that's the best thing you could ever do as a marketer. We've created tools. But the other side, and I know I'm talking your ear off, I hope this is okay, but with Intuify, they built the best survey experience. And so I mentioned at the beginning, you think about like the paper survey from 1985, and then you think about what surveys look like now, and they're pretty similar. And we don't want similar, we want something more engaging. And why does that matter? Well, it means that the answers that come into a survey are just as good as those really cool outputs I was talking about a second ago. Yeah. You ask people like in your own words, describe how much you love cheeseburgers. And we type that into a box right now on your phone. We replace that with voice. So all of a sudden we can capture, and I'll tell you, people are very willing to share their thoughts on cheeseburgers. I'm a big cheeseburger aficionado, by the way. They just don't want to type it into a box.
Yeah.
Because that's not how phones work.
Right.
So again, it's rethinking through survey experiences in the same way that we're rethinking through outputs, because all of it is about engagement. And why does engagement matter? It's because every person involved in the process is more vested, which is all we want. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really incredible stuff, what you guys are doing. And, it's fun for me, for multiple reasons to hear, where you're at today and the things that you guys are doing. And it's going to be an exciting, adventure for you guys to continue on this path. And, there is no doubt that this data is important, right? Like when you look at kind of the macro of what happens, data is all we really talk about in aggregate. I mean, all of the biggest companies out there are data companies. It's data mining. It's these insights that drive what we do, and so to have some kind of inside, ability to learn about that and to learn, through the technology and what you guys are doing is just always fascinating for me. So thanks for sharing so much of your story and what you guys are doing, Matt. I really love it.
I appreciate it, Dave.
Yeah, man. So before we wind up, I'd love to, we haven't really got to it, but I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about the book that you wrote in between the last time that we talked and today. Put a plug out there for it. Talk about kind of what prompted you writing the book to begin with. I'd love to share that story with everybody.
Oh, you caught me off guard. I'm totally unprepared. I appreciate it. So I wrote a book. And it has been since we talked. And one, I have trouble sitting still. COVID was a weird time where they told me to sit still. So I wrote a book, but it's called The Creative Catalyst. It's on Amazon, and it's literally talks about the ties between research and great creative marketing. And when you really think about it, well, one, I'll tell you, it talks about it in the book, but why does creativity matter? It matters because it's sticky. It's what works within marketing. When marketing works, creative marketing works better. And the purpose of research is to be the muse behind creativity. I mean, again, that's really what we've alluded to this whole time.
Yeah.
We're not just gathering information to be the smartest person in the room. We're gathering it to be the most creative. And that really is research's function. So The Creative Catalyst, how to create better marketing by asking and answering better marketing questions. It's available on Amazon. It's by me, Matt Seltzer, and it's big in purple because purple is my mom's favorite color, and she always encouraged me to write. So that's really about it. We could talk a whole separate time about why every business owner should write a book. But it's been a cool adventure.
Yeah, that is definitely a story for another day. But again, I love what you're doing, and I love that you got a book out there for people to start to warm up to this idea, because so often, and again, it doesn't matter if we're talking about kind of the stuff that I talk about or the stuff that you talk about. So often, the thing that connects those is this idea behind just kind of, hey, we put a line in the sand, this is what we're doing. And if we were to just engage some more people, ask better questions, we would probably be able to move the needle further faster than what we often do. So, it's one of the reasons I love all of the things that you guys are doing. So I think we will wind up there. Any final thoughts to share with people about what we talked about? And also, if you want to share with people the best way to get in touch with you, Matt.
A final thought, because I know people hesitate on starting research. Start. Doesn't have to be through a research partner. Even if you do it yourself, even if you just go talk to some of your customers, which asking questions, start. I cannot stress that enough. Your business will benefit from it. You will benefit from it. And every single conversation you have with a customer, even if it's through a survey, or your eyebrow will go up. And that's a good thing. You want to be intrigued by what people have to say. As far as getting in touch with me, you can find me at Intuify.com. That's Intuify.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Matt Seltzer. And please, by all means, connect with me. I love talking to people, and LinkedIn's a great vehicle for that.
Yeah, amazing. Well, Matt, thanks again for coming back on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.